We kept in touch over the 5 years, just phone and email and hanging out at each other's shows, and I suppose we were listening to each other's records and got to a point where we just felt like we wanted to make some songs together again. And Roddy was down in Edinburgh for a weekend and just thought, let's see what happens if we try writing some songs. So we spent a day together, and it was kind of like we hadn't really stopped.
Well, there was always the intention when we stopped performing in 2009 of doing something else. So it was whether we were going to do it within a year or within like 5 years. And it just ended up being probably about 3 years of absolutely kind of this sort of creative relationship between Colin and Rod and I was sort of stopped. And then, it felt like, as Rod said there, kind of a natural place to pick it up again. But then, that was nearly 2 years ago, and we just very, very slowly put a record together, got enough songs, and it was just Rod and I to begin with. Then we got Lucci involved on keyboard, and so the demos, they were evolving as demos much more as like, there was no going into a rehearsal room. It was all done that way, which was quite interesting for us, because we were always previously, certainly latterly with the band, everything been done 5 guys in a room with amps and all that, kind of traditional rock band kind of setup. And this was completely different, which was, for me, the only way I wanted to do it. We were kind of moving the band somewhere new, and that was pretty exciting. And that's why I think the record's really interesting.
When we started to write together, we realised that some of the songs were good, and we, I suppose we, like Roddy said, we kind of redrafted them a lot. It was the kind of changed as we added to them, and maybe then got Colin involved, and then got Lucci involved, and they kind of took a new life with each draft, I suppose, to the point where we felt some of them were already recorded, really, didn't need anything else, and then some of them we took into a sort of more traditional studio setting and did that way. But I mean, it's the first record we've kind of self-produced, so we haven't, been feeling like we had to go into a studio for a month and finish it. We were able to just sort of add to things and
or hand in things to being on record companies when your demos are scrutinised, and then like singles are picked, and that was an experience that Idlewild had for many years on a major label, and this was the total opposite of that. It was like we were in charge, and we didn't have any time constraint at all, because on the other side of that we have to keep on doing other things to keep money to pay the rent, sort of thing. But in many ways that was quite liberating for the LP, because we could just come back to it and think what the songs needed, and having new people in the band to work with. It was, the whole thing was kind of is like a re-energised creative experience. I'm loath to criticise it, because it's kind of the reason why we're still a band 20 years on, is because we had that major label support in the late 90s, and a lot of money put into the band and invested in the band, because we were pretty bad when we started, in a way that we needed a lot of time to develop, and the record company they invested in that. They stayed with us, so now we can put out our own records and tour and sell out concerts, and that's all because really there was a sort of structure in place at the beginning to allow us to kind of get better. Otherwise, nowadays I think I don't think we would have got a game. We would have put a single out, and then the spotlight would have moved on so quickly.
I think if you're a good band, and if you do what you want to do and go about it the right way, you can still do that. I think it has become more difficult, as Roddy says. I think that sort of nurture that you get from, and the support you get from a major label when you need it the most, when you don't really have a clue what's going on, but is really important. But nowadays I think most musicians have a much better idea of how the industry works before they've even written a song.
You have to bear in mind, when we started the band 20 years ago, it was still the internet obviously existed, but like we didn't, I don't have a computer, and we recorded things in 4-track and sent out tapes. That was the kind of, and it was difficult then to even imagine kind of like other people hearing the record, and it wasn't. So nowadays you can obviously make a record and make a recording and put it on the internet, everyone can hear it, and there's that access to music. And as Rod said, musicians and bands are so much more savvy in that way. They know how to get their stuff heard and through blogs, and I think it's really healthy. But obviously when we started, it wasn't that kind of thing. It was hard enough to get kind of like outside Edinburgh, but and I think also the level of musicianship nowadays is much higher than it was back then. We were coming from sort of that 90s kind of like indie rock, kind of punk rock kind of background, where it wasn't really about being able to play the guitar. It was just being like it's an exchange of ideas. And now there's obviously that exchange of ideas that's always going on, but people play well, play really well. I guess it's more competitive or something now. But luckily we're just kind of avoided all that. We kind of do our own things.